The concept and thought of recording sound is very interesting. Because it's not natural. And I say that in the sense of any sound before the tape recorder or radio will never be heard again. So, how would you go about creating something to capture sound so that you could hear it again? Another thought is sound or visual. Which one is it that you would want to hear again or see again, respectfully? I meant respectively. But back to sound and come back to that. On sound, if you are just around, like just pretend there's nothing to record sound. How would you go about recording sound if a tape recorder or radio, some type of transmit, if it did not exist? How would you go about creating that? If there were no way to record sound, how would you go about creating something to record sound? It's a very hard question to answer for anyone, except for, of course, those who know how to make a radio. But most of us don't know how to make a radio. So I think that is a very hard question to answer and interesting concept to think about. That if there was no radio or tape recorder, how would you go about recording yourself so that you could hear it again? And that's why it's also cool to just think that they made a way so that you could hear the same sound again. Now, which one's more important? The sound or the visual? Because did they make the tape recorder and the radio first because it was easier? Why didn't they make they made the camera first? Was it easier? I think so. A lot of things in this world reflect. Water reflects, glass reflects. I think it's easy to see a reflection. I think that one's easier. So sound, how would you create something that could recreate a sound? That's why I think tape recording and radio broadcasting is interesting. The transmission of sound. You don't know, outside of course, your voice, you don't know how to mimic sound. You don't naturally know how to recreate what you just said. Not naturally. If there was no radio or tape recorder, you don't know how to naturally capture sound. Hopefully that's coming across clear to you. That you don't know how to naturally replay a sound. Create something to capture your sound so that it can be replayed again. It's not natural. It's not intuitive. It's very smart. And of course, when you look up who went on to successfully do it, certain names pop up. It's like, it's very interesting. Because it's like not even appreciating how much more they know. Because they were able to think about that and they understand it. They have an understanding of the before. Because if we had an understanding of the before, you wouldn't even worry about it. You're like, if there's no radio, there's no tape recorder, I know how to make one. I understand how to capture sound. Why would that be important to anyone? Why would that be a life skill? Why would that be a life skill? Why would that be a life skill? I think that's awesome. If you were the only person on earth, and then you had to try to do that, Just imagine. All you see is trees and water. Let's say you're the first and only person on earth. You're the first and only person on earth. How? Well, not even that. You're the first and only person on earth. And then you find a way to get every person after you somehow, some way. There's going to be other people here. But for right now, you're the only one. But every person after you will know what your first sound was. The first time you made a sound. And what the first sound was. Imagine if you could do that. Is that impossible? Is that impossible? There's multiple timelines, right? Everything happens all at one time and it's all instantaneous. So, the other thought and logic is, let's say you're not thinking. Let's say you're not feeling. Imagine not thinking, not feeling, but existing. So, you're just living. You're not thinking. You're not feeling. So what would you be doing? What would you be doing if you weren't thinking? If you weren't feeling? You were just living. What would you do? If you didn't have to do anything? If you didn't move? If you didn't make a sound? And you didn't have to? If you were going to move or make a sound, what would be the very first sound, the very first move you would do? And what if there was somehow, some way to record you? That's a very, very interesting idea. What if you could see the very first person to ever exist? And you could hear their first sound. And you could record it. That's very far. But if you could see and you could hear the very first movement, and you could hear the very first sound of the very first person to ever exist, is that impossible? You know, those fake motivational, even the word impossible says I'm possible? Well, if that's ever going to be possible, then it already possibly exists that there's some people who can see the very first person. What do you think the very first person said or did? Because I'll tell you one thing. The woman who started doing that hawk tour, I don't know what woman was out here throwing that neck first, but bless her. Bless her heart, her mind, and her soul. Now, we already saw with the first person, we heard their first sound. We saw their first movement. Next thing you know, she hawked to and spit on that thing. Man, would you want to see that again? Would you want to hear that again? I mean, it's just sound and some visual, hearing again. I mean, no pun intended, but I'm just saying. Would you want to hear it again? Would you even want to see it again? What would make a person say, I want to hear this again? I gotta figure out a way to hear this again. I gotta figure out a way to see this again. Was it beauty? Was it ugly? Oh, I gotta see this again. Was the sound soothing? Or upsetting? To make you say, oh, I want to hear this again. I want to see this again, like the information. But it always upsets you that somehow, some way, there was a time that what you heard, you'll never hear again. And what you saw, you'll never see again. So how could you ever prove that it ever existed and how much existed before that or then? How can you ever prove that something ever existed before that and ever again? What if nobody is ever able to hear this again or see this again? What if? Would they even think about this existence? Basically, if you restart, something happens, right? There's no more humans. All goes away. all the humans go away. And then they start to pop up again. They start making sounds and movements. It all starts up again. But they have no recollection of whatever came before them. They'll never know that anything came before them. They'll never know how far or not as far we went. You'll never know how far we went because all the humans stopped existing through some cataclysmic event. And then it started all up over again, but they didn't know what came before them. They didn't know anything ever outside of them ever existed. They thought they were the first ones. They thought they were the first humans. It's easy to see how they could think that. It's easy to see how they would just never know. This is an alien perspective. No? Just to say that I know. Now, grasping that concept, does that make you think about death or immortality? Does that make you think about your finality? That you will certainly no longer exist at some point. Do you think there's a way to supersede that? Do you think there's ever such a way to preserve your existence so that it withstands the test of time, no matter what? Is there a way to capture your existence forever? Is there a way to capture your total existence forever? So that a million years from now, someone can interact with you in a way and trust fully and confidently and say, hmm, this is what he looked like. This is what he sounded like. This is how he talked and this is how he moved. I guess it would be akin to an eternal metaverse. Yes? The metaverse will very much look real. And then at some point, making the metaverse feel real. To such a point that you don't know if the metaverse is real and what's not real outside of the metaverse, making the metaverse feel so real. It's almost surreal. Making it so that the metaverse not only looks but feels real, as if it's really real. And you can't tell the difference between when it's not real and it is real. Not the country Israel, but creating such a program that it feels real. 3D program, or is it 4D? What dimension is it so that it actually starts to feel real? And you can't tell the difference between when you're playing the game and you're not playing the game. Isn't that a very kind of creepy, but at the same time, kind of cool game? That'll potentially happen in our lifetime, right? The metaverse is coming. The metaverse is coming. The metaverse is come, right? Start thinking after that. That's the one part. Is like, this is what we're thinking about now. What comes after that? So let's say the metaverse exists, right? So let's say the metaverse exists, and then it just looks real, right? But then the next step after the metaverse is to make it feel real. Now, how could you make the metaverse feel real? And this is interesting concept. Capturing sound, one thing. Capturing visual, another thing. So capturing video, of course, all right. But making, how do you capture a feeling? Like, is that too impossible? To make people feel a certain way and actually feel an experience. Like they feel it so much just that they were actually there. Can you make it so that people feel like they're actually here? Like experiencing same thing I'm experiencing. Can I reach through the phone? Making the metaverse or whatever comes after the metaverse, because it has to be called something different, right? That can't be called the metaverse. What's after the metaverse is the one that makes you feel it, right? It's the next step after. You got the sound, right? You got the look, right? But the one that makes you, the one that puts you right there. The one that goes beyond, okay, I see a table, but I can actually, this is what it feels like. Is that even possible? Because it's the idea to entertain. Is that even possible? To move, it's either the metaverse is more or less what I'm talking about. Getting it to such a place that you can actually feel what you see. Is there a way to induce that? Is that simply, for instance, I think this is possible if they gave you some gloves, right? If you had some gloves that could alter their feeling. So you got gloves. So you put the gloves on, and I say this in such a way that the gloves will feel like water if you touch water. It can and it'll have like the gloves will feel like water. Or if you touch something hot, you'll feel heat at that point in your hand. So the metaverse partially comes with gloves. Those sensations right there will give you an immersive, interactive feeling. Now, if we were to take it a step further, if it's a whole suit, if it's an entire suit, very interesting concept to think about, but you put on a suit and parts of the suit give off different sensations and will give you a very interactive and immersive experience. In such a way that if you were to be in a pool in the metaverse, you might feel water sensations on different parts of the suit. It's going to be that. Now, if you're familiar with the NBA and games like 2K and stuff like that, they give the players bodysuits and they tell them to recreate these movements, and we track those movements. It's not a far-fetched thought. It's just something to think about. Just something to think about. Sometimes the afterthought can be so daunting that you never even pursue it. There's someone out there who knows more than you do that could possibly pursue it. And it's why haven't they done it? Why isn't there an invisible Tesla? I want an invisible Tesla, or at least a transparent one. I want a transparent Tesla, Lamborghini. Where when you look at the car, you can quite literally see the engine. Now, I don't even care if I'm able to drive the car or not. I'm just envisioning myself inside of a glass Lamborghini. The whole car is see through it. I mean, except for the engine and the seats. Like, from the outside of the car, you can see the inside of the car. And I'm just puffing my cigar. I keep having this laughable idea, thinking about what color should the Lamborghini be, and it's going to be colorless. It'll be see-through, a glass Lamborghini. Hmm. You know, they have to be delivered. It's just shipped, but it can't be driven, not with this current state of intelligence. A glass Lamborghini. Can you picture it? Who would you ever expect to see have a glass Lamborghini? I have a glass Lamborghini.